Hey, you legends, we want to start this video off by first finishing up the plugin giveaway. So Sean Miller, Durlathy, and Keenan Crow. First person to comment on here, I know all of you guys posted the video, so the first one to comment under this video wins the plugins. Once again, that's Sean Miller, Durlathy, sorry if I mispronounced that, and Keenan Crow. First one to comment in this video wins. So what we're gonna do here is we're doing an explanation of the patches that we made on the SSL. There's a lot of things that go into consideration where I'm gonna place a piece of gear when it comes to this thing and dealing with Pro Tools and my audio interfaces as well, but there's really two typical patch points that I'm gonna be making today. So one goes from the multi-track returns into the multi-track sends, and that will be from right up here and to right down here. And that patch can be pretty much thought of as Pro Tools in and Pro Tools out. If I want to patch a distressor straight into a Pro Tools insert and ignore the console completely, that's how I need to make the patch. But when it comes to the desk, I tend to use this pretty much as a big routing matrix for my outboard gear. So instead of just inserting that distressor, I'll insert a whole channel strip from line input to direct output, and that will give me the ability to not only have that distressor, but also an SSL, filter, EQ, compressor, gate, line amplifier, fader, a whole bunch of other things that allow me to make decisions quickly and have a good time while doing it. So some gear will hang directly off Pro Tools, some gear will hang through the console's insert sends and returns, which are managed by going from the insert send to the insert return on the particular channel that we're dealing with. And some stuff may have things on a channel as well as that same Pro Tools insert. So if the console's off, it'll go through the Pro Tools insert, and if the console's on, it'll go through the desk, and we'll listen to that. We've got to go through, we've got to make some decisions. Some things will have multiple things patched in a row, and there's also some patches that we have to make that have to deal with our center section, stuff that lives inside of the center section of the console, such as the masterpiece, as well as the 2-bus compressor and how we get in and out of that, featuring things like the Lavery. So join us as we go and we patch away. I will go and patch everything first. I will go and I will talk about each piece, where I patched it and why. So channel 1 is my kick drum typically, and I'm gonna patch that into A5, which is here, and that is my Melcore EQ, channel 1, and you can see that this patch has been utilized many a times. That is just for what I would consider vibe. The SSL has a particular vibe to its equalizer, and the Melcore has its own vibe. If I'm going for a modern sound, I tend to leave the insert off and I just rock the SSL EQ and compressor. If I want like an older sound or a jazz record, or I want to take the top off of something and chill it out, the Melcore is awesome. If I want to go after what I would consider a very 60s, early 70s workflow, where you don't so much as carve out things with the parametric EQ as much as you boost the top and high, the top and bottom with big wide shelves. Very, very useful in trying to get a vibe. And I've got one for my kick drum, and I also have one for my snare drum. So I have another patch that I need to make as well on this channel, because the snare drum will feed into the Melcore, which is on 6, and then we will come out of the Melcore and we will go into the distressor, which lives on B5. So that will be right below there, right into B5, and then we will come out of B5 and we will go back in to channel 2's insert return. A lot of heavy lifting gets done with just the SSL EQ and dynamics. In some situations, I want to be able to go after a more modern sound, and the distressor is great for a modern snare drum. Who am I to say? It's not my favorite sound. I tend to stay away from it, but while it's in here, I'm gonna have it on that channel. I would say that it's maybe like a 1 out of 10 thing, definitely not an everyday occurrence. But I have my Melcore as well, and I can just turn my Melcore to flat, use the distressor if I'm going after something modern, or I can turn the distressor to bypass, turn the EQ on the console to bypass, just use Melcore if I'm going after something older sounding on the snare drum. That is very, very flexible, I found. Sometimes I may change out the Melcore for something like the left side of the Soundtech, just so I have more control. Having 10 channels of parametric equalization between the SSL and the Soundtech can be a lot of fun. So the next thing are my toms. Toms are usually handled by the SSL channels, and then I like to insert this Aphex that we have over here in the rack, the 204, and that is currently living on B30 and 31. These, you can see, are a little bit too far to make that patch, so we'll go and we'll grab some longer cables. So we will go 3 and 4, left and right, into B30 and 31, and we will come out of 30 and 31. The Aphex is really, really great on toms. I definitely didn't invent that trick. You know, the first place I heard about it was from Ryan Hewitt, and if you haven't tried one, you definitely should. It's an awesome piece for what it does. The next thing we have will be our overheads, and then after that we will have our rooms. On our overheads, I tend to just rock SSL EQs, but I do have something else that I like to patch here, because on my overheads I have B2 and 3, which is my 1178 from Universal Audio. And it's really nice to have a pair of API EQs going into that. It's a great vocal sound. It's great on the overheads actually, and it can be very useful in a lot of places. So I tend to park some API EQs going into the 1178. So we'll strap those right now. So we're gonna use the API 550As, and we are going to park them on that 1178 on 7 and 8, or 5 and 6. 7 and 8, A7 and 8 we need to get into. We need to come out of A7 and 8. We need to go into B2 and 3. We will come out of B2 and 3. And we'll go back into 5 and 6. So I like to try and use the shorter cables if I can, because you can see it helps to keep everything nice, neat, and tidy. It will start to get overwhelming. The next thing we have are our rooms, and what I like to do with the rooms is put something pretty smashy. We have a couple different choices. We have the Compex, and we have the 690 voiceover limiter, which is an even more aggressive version of the Compex. Let's go ahead and set it up so that both of those live on our rooms, and we can choose which ones we want to use pretty much with the flip of a switch. Then we're going into B8 and 9. We're coming out of B8 and B9, and we are going back in to our insert 7 and 8 returns. That patch goes from our insert send into the 690 voiceover limiter, and then out of the 690 voiceover limiter into our Compex. And that gives us the ability to kind of just pick and choose by using the bypass switches on those two devices what we'd like to blow up the rooms with. So the next bucket is where I get into things like the bass and the guitar. Since I've got my drums all the way to the left on my first bucket, I tend to really like putting my bass on channel number 9 because it's right next to those things. And then also, you know, getting the balance of the kick drum versus bass level, I can grab the first faders of each bucket and I know right where they are, and I'm all, this guy. I've got extra stuff, you know. Right now, I typically tend to have my Summit TLA 100 patched across the bass, which is absolutely amazing. I have an old one that was built when Dave Hill was there, and Al Schmidt, you know, highly, highly recommended that box. And I have to say, I don't think that there's anything better on the bass. So we will definitely get the TLA 100 patched in there, but I want to have an equalizer before it. And I want to have something with a little bit of weight. So why don't we go ahead and try out throwing one of our Angus equalizers on that. We've got 3 of them. We'll throw one on the bass, and we're definitely going to throw the other 2 on guitars. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go into channel 9, and Angus EQ1 is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 13. So A13, then we will come out of A13. We are going to patch that in to B4. We'll come out of B4. We will patch that back into our insert send. Okay, so now we're on to the next bucket. I like to leave channel 10 open. We'll come back and see what we have to throw there. I know we'll probably end up having something fun. I can already think of one thing that we have a one-off of already to throw there that would be fun, but we're gonna leave 10. 10 is where I like to throw a mono channel for things like lead guitar. It also gets used for a couple other things, but tends to be lead guitar solos or background vocals, you know, that need to get like an effect. We tend to do something fancy there, have some fun with it. The next thing that I want to patch will be 11 and 12, which is where my main guitars live. These are my main stereo guitars, and I'm going to patch 2 Angus equalizers into my LA3As. And who doesn't love LA3As on guitars? And patch 9 and 10, or 10 and 11, I mean. That will go into the next 2 Angus EQs. And then out of those Angus equalizers, it will come back in to A3 and 4, which are my LA3As. And I will come out of A3 and 4 and back into insert return 10. Patch bay is definitely getting tight, which is fine. This stuff doesn't tend to change too often. And if I work well, work my way down through it, I'm usually pretty good. The next thing that we need to do is 13 and 14. 13 and 14 tends to be a little bit of a catch-all track. It can end up with things like acoustic guitars on it, can end up with keyboard parts on it. What I found is it's really nice to just go ahead and have a nice compressor there that sounds amazing and does a great job, and a nice pair of equalizers that can add some vibe and a little bit of flavor if you want to. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna patch our API 550Bs into our Tweed CL02, and that is a very 33609 David Reese designed style compressor. So we will go from the APIs and into the Neve, back to the SSL. We're gonna go from 12 and 13. We're gonna go into 7, 8, 9, 10. So A9 and 10. We're gonna come out. A9 and 10. We're gonna go into B10 and 11. We're gonna come out B10 and 11. We're gonna go back into our insert return on 12 and 13. Cool. So then we've got 15 and 16. 15 and 16 tend to be a little bit of catch-all tracks as well, but these tend to be the main spot where I put background vocals. I like to go ahead and try and keep these things relatively clean, but I also do like to try and add some space to them, and they're one of the places that I want to be particularly airy. So I'm gonna strap a couple things across that, and they kind of lend themselves to that. We've got the SRS and we've got our NTI, and the SRS that we're using is the Pro 200 and our NTI is an EQ2. These things both are bright and airy. This is one of those things where I will use this not only for background vocals, but a lot of other things that you may want to get wide and sit outside, or, you know, just be generally bright and nice. So now we're up to channel 17, which is my lead vocal. We are going to throw a couple things here. One of those will be my 1176, and another one will be a channel of the Soundtech equalizer, the right channel. We'll probably just start there. So we'll go Soundtech, which is A2, into B1. Now let's go ahead and take a little bit of stock about what we still have left to patch. We have this tremolo device. We've got a couple of more Angus equalizers. we have just the distressor from this rack over here is left. And then pretty much all of our effects over from that rack. Oh, we missed something that we definitely need to patch, which is B39. B39 is our DBX. From our Sontec into our 1176 into our DBX 902 de-esser, which is the vocal chain. Then after that, we have outboard effects in that rack, which we may hang off the sends of our console. We'll probably hang those off Pro Tools. We've got a 3630, which is for making some stuff aggressive and weird. We've got an Art VLA, which is pretty much just a catch-all compressor. And then we've got a pair of Filtecs and some other stuff. So the majority of stuff that we are going to be utilized as far as patches have been done. But let's go ahead and start thinking about our patches for all of this stuff hanging off of Pro Tools. We have our masterpiece, which shows up here in the center of the console. And I actually use this as a one in, one out sort of deal, where I go into the left side of the masterpiece and then out of the left side into the right side and then out of the right side and back into Pro Tools. I've never really found this thing super suitable for mastering purposes, but a lot of times I will utilize it for lead vocal on a record that I'm working on, which is exactly what's happening here. So I'm going to go ahead and insert this on 24. So that's hanging out off of Pro Tools. So it's not actually hanging out on the desk on the insert of channel 24. It's just hanging off a, insert 24 from Pro Tools. Let's go ahead and keep patching through the room, see what we end up with. So there's a couple things that I want to go ahead and test before we continue forward. But currently, we just have stuff from that rack left to do. So let's go through and test where we're at and see how we're doing. The next thing that I want to go in and patch in is the outboard effects. These will tend to live in a couple different spots. One that I still have to complete is channel 10, which is where I put lead guitars. Some other stuff can end up here, but typically it's going to be things with some vibe, things with throws, and we are going to patch in this Angus, which is known as the 1P for one parametric and then 4 fixed frequency equalizer. And we are then going to patch into our Roland SDE 3000 so that we can then go and adjust the mix, and we can set up some pretty cool throws. We can put some delay on our lead guitar, print it with some sauce. Let me go ahead and patch that now. So we're gonna go channel 10, insert send. We're gonna go into our API rack, which has our Angus in it, and then out of that and in to B29. Boom. So we're in B29. We're going to come out of B29. We're going to go back in to 10. So I don't have a compressor on that, but that's fine because I'm just going to use the channel compressor to squeeze the shit out of stuff. We still have our second SPX. We have our SPX 990 and we have our Yamaha Rev over there. And then we also have our 3060 and we've got our VLAs to deal with. So let's patch our VLAs. And I'm just gonna do that into 18 and 19. So we'll patch into our VLAs. Actually, we're not gonna patch into our VLAs. What I wanna do is, what's our rev on? 2728. So we're gonna patch from that guy. We're going to patch from out of that into B37 and 38. And from B37 and 38, we will patch back in to 18 and 19. And that gives me the ability, now I've set up a channel where I've got this cool reverb that has a great bypass going into a pretty versatile compressor, a little bit on the shittier side, but it's definitely got a vibe and utilized by dudes like Dave Friedman and the dude who makes Cake Records to great effect. So I can go ahead and come up with some pretty interesting reverb effects that I then destroy with this, you know, Art VLA compressor. It is a fun, creative spot to hang out. Plus, it's right here, you know, so it's nice to be able to just hang out close to me and come up with an idea and EQ it and affect it and say, okay, that's cool. Let's move on and print that. So for the most part, everything is patched now. I'm gonna want to go ahead and take care of patching some things that I know that I want to hang out off of Pro Tools now. So you can see that I've got these two groups here that are left out, 20, 21, 22, and 23. And I'm going to utilize those for Yamaha reverbs that I want to be able to get in and out of the box easily. So that will be my SPX. And that shows up on B33, 33, and 34. Return that. And again, so that's a 25 and 26. Okay, 25 and 26. And so now everything is patched except for a couple compressors. And let's go ahead and see how I can go about freeing up some patch cables. So I got that going, and then the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to patch from 25 and 26, which are what feeds the first stereo channel. I'm going to patch that in to my SSL's pre-VCA ins and post-VCA outs. So VCA A, B, and C send and return. So pre and post. I'm going to go into the pre-send, and I'm going to come out of the post here, and I'm going to patch those into the Lavery. So now we have a Lavery. And I'm going to go ahead, and we have our listen mic compressor output. So we have listen mics in up here, and I'm going to just go and hang that on channel 24's insert send and return. So we're going into it, we're coming out. So I have a spot to use my listen mic compressor, and it'll live here. So now I can get into my SSL bus compressor, got my Yamaha reverbs. I am pretty much good to go. I've got a couple things left to patch that I will figure out as time progresses, but I wanted to leave myself some options. I have my wow thing. I've got my Focusrite transformers that I still need to patch. The stereo bus of the console. We will go into 21 and 23. A will come out of A21. Okay. Wonderful. So you can see that there's a whole chunk here that's not utilized in this patch setup. These live in the bottom of that rack. These live in the bottom of that rack. But overall, it's a pretty flexible system. And we've got most of the stuff that we need to patched in. We've got our stereo bus. We've got our masterpiece. We could mix through the console as a console. We could mix with just Pro Tools and some of our outboard gear. And we could also turn the desk on and have access to tons of fun stuff and a huge routing matrix. So join us in another video as we go through each one of these pieces and what kind of their vibe is. So hopefully that was helpful, and you saw how I go and lay out some of this stuff. You know, hopefully for the most part, it'll be pretty, you know, static and it won't change too much. You can see that that side of the desk, those two buckets are pretty locked in all the way up until about channel 17. From there, this is more experimentation time, distorting, funsy time. It's also harder to get to because it's past my keyboard and it's kind of a pain in the ass to work on. So I tend to hang out over in those two buckets, and so does the rest of my gear. So hopefully you can see how a room like this can be flexible. We have stuff hanging off the desk. We have stuff hanging off Pro Tools analog. We also have stuff hanging off Pro Tools digitally with our Metric Halo rig featuring the Tascam 2424s that we set up in our other video. So currently, I believe we have close to 96 I/O between this and the back rack, and it's tons of fun. There's tons of sounds everywhere, and you can live in Pro Tools and have access to a bunch of fun stuff that you don't really need to go touch in the back rack, or you can turn on the desk and really go to town. I'm depending on your son to pull